Hi, my name is Kerry Critchlow from RCR Recording Studios. And today we're going to get a little bit more into chord theory, and we're going to get a little bit more advanced with this. We're going to get into things like advanced triads, chord extensions, and things of this nature. Now, I have to preface this with we're getting a little bit beyond the basics, and so some of this is going to be a little bit more complicated. I'm going to try and simplify it as best I can. But we are definitely getting into the realm where we're moving beyond the basics and we're getting into things that are a little bit more complicated to a degree. And again, I'll try and simplify it as best I can. And I think we're going to start by getting into just a quick review of something we've already gone over in a previous video when it deals with when it comes to chord theory. Now, I'm not sure if this is the best way to do it, but as you can see here, I've brought up a spreadsheet, and I've done this just to keep things aligned as best I can. I couldn't figure out how to do that in a Word doc. I'm kind of an idiot when it comes to that kind of stuff, but hopefully this will all make sense. Now, we're going to start with the basic whole scale formula, and as we've gone over, that's whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. And that is the formula you can plug in to figure out which notes are in a scale, what chords are in that major scale, et cetera, et cetera. And then we also have the chord degrees here. So this should all kind of look a little bit more, look familiar if you've seen some of my previous videos. We're just going to get a little bit more into depth on these concepts and how you can apply them when it comes to writing music and doing your productions. I'm also going to try and contextualize it a little bit with some examples here. We're going to bring up a piano. And I'm going to do my best to contextualize this by giving some musical examples here with our MIDI piano here. So we've got our whole scale formula. That's whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. I know I sound like a broken record, but this is important. And if you can memorize this formula, you're halfway to being able to write just about any song you really want. There are also other scale formulas. There's, like major scales, minor scales, and all sorts of fun stuff out there with all different formulas. But we're going to stick with the whole scale formula for today. And this is not going to be super comprehensive. There's a reason that they have collegiate courses that teach this kind of thing. What I'm going to do is I'm going to do my best to kind of dumb this down a little bit so that not only you can understand it, but I can understand it, because some of this does go over my head. And so I'll be learning along with you as we go. But just as a quick review, we've gone over our whole scale formula, and we have our chord degrees here, and these are Roman numerals. And this is just to, and this is always going to be the same in any major scale. Your first chord is going to be major. Your second chord is going to be minor. Your third chord is going to be minor. Your fourth chord is going to be major. Your fifth chord is going to be major. Your sixth chord is going to be minor. Your seventh chord is going to be minor or diminished, technically diminished. And then your eighth chord is just your one chord again. So we start all over again. And then I've written out an extension as we go here. And then I've written out the numbers here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc. And you can use this to figure out in any key. If we change this up to, say, the key of A or the key of E flat or whatever, all you're doing is substituting the note names out, but everything else, this will stay the same. This will stay the same. And I'll show you some examples of that as we go. We'll substitute out C with like A and E flat just to give you some context, with a key that has some sharps in it and a key that has some flats in it. But the key of C has no flats and no sharps, so it tends to be a little bit more straightforward. And so it's a good place to start, at least. And then we've gone over this before, but we have the chord in our scale, the chords in our scale, and then we have the notes in our scale. And if we were to play out the notes of a C major scale, that would look like this. And we're still in 6/8 from last week. Let's go ahead and put this into 4/4, just to keep things simple. And that should align better. And then we play that, and that scale will sound like this. Now, no matter what note you're starting on, the scale will always have the same relative information. So if we were to say, move this to a D scale, now the notes have all kept their relative distances, we'll say. It's still a whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. All right. And so it's going to sound very similar if we play a D major scale. And the only difference is that now we have a F sharp and a C sharp in a D major scale, as you can see. And if we were to say, make this an A major scale, still whole, whole, half, or whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. But in A, we have a C sharp, we have an F sharp, and we have a G sharp. But it sounds very much the same as a C major or a D major. And so a major scale is kind of going to sound the same. It's just a matter of which starting note you happen to be starting on. And then, you know, here's our E flat, because I told you we do something with some flats in it. So we're starting on E flat. And again, nothing has changed. The same intervals are happening. We still have our whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. But now we have an E flat, we have a flat, and we have a B flat. Okay? And there you go. And so we can figure out, you know, what notes belong in any scale using the formula from over here, this whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. All right. And once again, just to go over some of the rules when you're trying to figure out these formulas or these scales yourself, you pick your starting note, whatever note that is. Now, every single note must be used. So we have to have an A, a B, a C, a D, an E, an F, and a G. They all have to be represented in that scale. And you cannot have the same letter repeat. So you cannot have two C's in a scale, for instance. You can't have a C and then say like a C flat or a C sharp be in that same scale. You would have to resort to double flats or double sharps or things of that nature. And if you look at a circle of fifths, it makes it a little easier to avoid the having to run into double sharps or double flats. And we might get into that in a future video. But the idea is that you don't want to have any repeating letters. They all have to be, every letter has to be represented in the scale, and it has to be in alphabetical order, just whatever note you're starting on. And so that's kind of the rule when you're starting off, when you're trying to figure out how to apply this formula. And then we can start deriving some information once we have figured out what notes are in that scale. We can figure out what chords are in that scale. And then we can also figure out what notes make up that chord. So, and again, this is review from a previous video, but I want to make sure that you really have this concept down. And so I've written out these numbers. Now, these numbers will change depending on what note we're starting on. So in this case, we're starting on C. And for a C major chord, you're going to use a 1, a 3, and a 5 to figure out the notes that go into your C major scale chord. And that would be a C, an E, and a G. So if we wanted to write out what a C chord was, a C chord would be a C, E, G. Just like that. Now, if we wanted to figure out what was in this D minor chord, we would actually start our count here on the D minor as a 1. So we would do a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And to figure out what notes make up this D minor chord, it would be a D, an F, because that's where our 3 is, and an A, because that's where our 5 is. And so a D minor would be a D, F, and an A. And that is a D minor chord. Now, these are actually called triads. So I might actually just bring this down here for right now. C, E, G, D, F, A. And that'll give us some room to keep going with some of these numbers. So we'll delete this for now. And we're going to figure out our E minor chord. And so for an E minor chord, we have our 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And so an E minor has a 1, a 3, the G, and then the 5 is a B. And so an E minor chord will be an E, G, B. And etc. So you can keep going with this, right? You can figure out all of the chords doing this little trick. Now, there is something that we probably need to go over, because technically a triad is essentially just a fancy word for 3. It just means there are 3 notes in the chord. And a basic major triad, the formula would be a 1, 3, 5. So we do a 1, 3, 5. And that is the formula for a major triad. For a minor triad, the formula is actually a 1, flat 3, 5. And so I'm going to kind of go over this in just a moment here. Let's give an example here. So let's get rid of this, and we'll go to a C major chord. And we have a 1, our 3, and our 5, a C, E, and a G. And we'll just make that a whole note for now. And if we play it, it sounds like this. Now that's a 1, 3, 5. Now, this gets a little confusing because using this trick is kind of cheating in a way, and it's kind of designed to be a cheat, but it will not actually tell you how to make up, say, a C minor chord. Now, there is no C minor in a C major scale, but if you wanted to make this C minor, what you would do is you would take the third and you would flat it. So if we go back to our example here, here's our third, the E is our third, C, E, G, 1, 3, 5. Now we need to take this E, and if we want to make it a minor chord, we're going to flat it, which means we're going to take it down 1/2 step. All right, so we've taken our E down to an E flat. Now it's a C, E flat, and a G, and this is now a C minor chord. And you can hear that the minor chord sounds a little sadder than a major chord. Major chord has kind of a happier sort of sound. A minor chord has a kind of a sadder sound. And so our formula for a minor triad is going to be a 1, flat 3, 5. And actually probably a better way to do it would be this. So we'll say major, can't spell. There we go. So a major triad is going to be a 1, 3, 5. A minor triad is going to be a 1, flat 3, 5. All right. So if we look at these minors here, the D minor, the E minor, the A minor, even though we're plugging in our number here for, say, the D minor, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, this is not a minor triad thing. This is just a quick and easy, dirty, cheap way to figure out what notes go into this D minor based on this setup here, okay? But the actual formula for this minor triad is a flat 3. And the way we can figure that out is if we take this D major, if we take the third, which is an F, and we make it major, or take sharp the third of this minor, we're going to actually make that D minor a major. So we have a D, we have an F, and we have an A. Now, that is a 1, flat 3, 5. And I know this is confusing, and I apologize because the way I've been teaching you so far how to figure out what notes go into these chords is just that. These are not actually the formulas for deriving your minors or majors or other triads. They're just simply ways that you can quickly and easily figure out what notes go into these chords. But if we go over here, this is a D minor. So if we were, a D major is actually a D F sharp and an A. Well, if we go back and look at our scale here, there is no F sharp in the key of C. So this is a D minor. So I'm just trying to differentiate and make it as clear as I can. And I apologize if I'm doing a poor job of this, but I'm trying to make it as clear as I can that using this system here is not this formula here. When I say 1, 3, and 5, that's not going to translate automatically when you're doing it here to a major chord, right? Or, you know, this D minor 1, 3, 5. It's actually, this D minor is actually a 1, flat 3, and a 5. There's a distinguishment there. Here's the formula for a minor chord. Here's the formula for a major chord. Here is just a quick way to figure out what note goes into the chord. All right. So there's a differentiation. God, I cannot talk. They're different. They're not the same thing. I'm not talking about the same thing when I say 1, 3, 5 up here. That is not the same as down here. That being said, there are also other triads besides just major and minor. There are things like augmented, diminished, suspendeds, Lydian, Phrygian. There's all sorts of triads. Now, we're not going to get into all of them, but we are going to get into a few of them just so that you can start to kind of get an idea of how you can build your own triads. And the purpose of this really, like, I know it's a little pedantic to say major is happy and minor is sad, but what you're really doing is with music, you're creating emotion, you're creating feeling, you're trying to convey a sense of feeling to the listener, all right? And what feeling that is completely up to you. If you want it to be happy and uplifting or triumphant, if you want it to be sad, depressing, contemplative, thoughtful, eerie, suspenseful, these are all feelings that you can convey to the listener. And knowing these triads and different chords, knowing the extensions, these are all ways to add what's called dissonance to your track. And the type, depending on the type of dissonance you use, will create a certain type of feeling. For instance, here is, let's go back to our C major here, C, E, and G. What if I were to take this G and, well, what if I were to add in a G sharp here on top of this whole chord? These two chords these two notes are right next to each other, and if I were to play this chord, it's going to sound a little off. It's going to sound a little, well, the correct word would be dissonant. It's just a little jumbled, a little, like, it's not quite right. And so you can use dissonance to create that tension in the music, and then you can either keep that tension or you can resolve it. And there are different ways you can go about creating the tension and then resolving it. So, for instance, if we come back here, we also have, say, a suspended chord. And there's a few different suspendeds. We're going to do a suspended fourth. All right. So a sus4 triad would be, we are going to, instead of having this be an E, it's actually going to be a G. And I'll show you how you can, just one way in which you might create tension and then resolve it. So right now we are suspending to the 4th degree of the scale. So 1, 2, 3, 4, the F, 5, the G. So we're going to play a 1, 4, 5 chord. That's a suspended 4th. And then we're going to resolve that to a C major, which is a 1, 3, 5. All right. And so a suspended triad would be a 1, 4, 5. You also have a sus2. And as you can guess, that would be a 1, 2, 5. And instead of this being on the F, we move it down to the 2, the D, the 2nd degree of our scale. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we have a 1, 2, 5. And then again, we're going to just resolve it right to the C major. And so that's going to sound like this. So we create tension by suspending our chord, and then we resolve that tension by landing on this C major. And so these are some examples of how you can create tension and resolution in your music, all right? All just based on these triads. There are also things like augmented and diminished chords. So we have an augmented chord, and that is going to be a 1, 3, sharp 5. All right? So if we take our C major again, or our C chord, it would be a 1, a 3, and then we're doing a sharp 5, which means we're going to a G sharp here. Now, this is out of the key of C major, but this is just kind of ways that you can play with the different chords you're using, right? And again, you can use that to resolve your chord. So this an augmented chord has a very dissonant sound to it. It sounds kind of unpleasant. It sort of puts you on edge a little bit, and that's the point, all right, for using an augmented, is to create that tension. And then again, like, you can choose to resolve that tension by landing on something that has no dissonance in it, like a major triad, or you can create even more tension. You can keep it going however you want to do it. It's about what feeling you want to convey. For instance, if you were listening to a horror movie, oftentimes they use a lot of dissonant notes in order to put you on edge, and that gives you just a sense of things not being right, and it creates that sort of the feeling or the mood, the vibe that the movie wants to give you. They want to scare you. They want to make sure that you're on edge, because it's easier to scare you when you're on edge, and the music is helping to convey that feeling. Conversely, you know, if you were listening to, say, like a fantasy or some sort of an epic drama or something like that, you might have something more triumphant, a superhero movie. You might have something a little bit more triumphant, something that's going to resolve, something that's going to make you feel inspired or things of that nature. And so these are just different tools you can use to create different emotions in the listener. Another formula for triads is called diminished, and that is going to be a 1, flat 3, flat 5. All right, and a 1, flat 3, flat 5. So if we have our C major chord here, we're going to drop our E to an E flat, And if our G is the fifth, we're going to also drop that to an F sharp. And now we have a C diminished chord. Again, you can either choose to resolve it or not. That's up to you. But that is a diminished chord, and this is the formula for creating a diminished chord, no matter what note you're starting with. Again, I can take this and I can move this to, say, an E. All right, and now we have an E diminished to an E major chord. Everything has stayed the same. All the intervals are still intact here. It's still a 1, flat 3, flat 5 to a 1, 3, 5. All right. So this is how you can have fun with your chords and start to create some tension and suspense. Now, sometimes using these formulas will take you out of the key of the song you're in, and sometimes not, depending on how you're going about it. And there are kind of ways that work better than others to do this, and we may go into that in the future. Right now, I'm just trying to give you some very basic concepts here on how to do that. And as you can see, you can use these numbers to figure out what notes would be going into those types of chords. So, for instance, if we're looking at a C sus4, a 1, 4, 5, well, we have a 1, a 4, and a 5. So we know that a C sus4 is going to be a C, an F, and a G. All right. We also know that if we want to make a C a minor, we need to flat this third. So it's not going to be an E major anymore. It's going to be a flat third. It's actually going to be an E flat. All right. If we want to make this C chord a augmented, we know that we have a 1, a 3, and a 5, and we need to make this 5 sharp. So we need to make this G a G sharp. And conversely, if you want to make it a diminished chord, you need to make the 1, 3, 5. You need to flat the E to a E flat, and you need to flat the G to a G flat. All right. So I hope this is all helping and making sense. There are more triads that are out there. We're not going to get into all of them today. Like I said, I'm just trying to kind of introduce you to the concept of how you can build some of these chords. And these are some of the more common ways to do it. Especially your major, your minor, your susses, your augmented and your diminished. These are just very common ways to add tension to your chords so that you can later resolve them if you would like to, okay? And again, this would work here if we wanted to figure out your minor version of this. So let's say we want to figure out an E, 3, 4, 5, and we want to figure out what, for instance, a well, I guess this may not make a lot of sense, but if you wanted to do an E minor suspended, we would have a E, G, B. So this is an E minor. And if we wanted to make it a E sus, we would bring it down to a 2. And you could resolve it to an E minor, but it may not actually, it may not sound like it's actually resolving here. It almost feels like there's still a little bit more tension there. But so again, but if you wanted to figure out what was in an E sus 2, you have a 1, a 2, and a 5. In this case, the which is why it doesn't always work super well when you're doing this little trick here. This is only going to really tell you the chords that belong in your kind of standard things. If you wanted to find out, well, how to do this same trick to an E, you'd have to probably have the an E major scale in order to apply this, like we're applying it to the C here. Which is why I wanted to differentiate between this method here of figuring out notes in the scale and these formulas here, all right? Because this is a cheap way to do it some of the times, but it won't work all of the times because an E, F, and a B does not create an E sus2. An E, F sharp, and a B create an E sus2, all right? So this will not always work in every case. So just be cautious with that. I was just trying to give you a quick, dirty, easy, cheaty way to figure out how some of this works, but it will not work in every case, okay? And so I just want you to be aware of that as we're moving forward. If you were to want to figure out how to do that with this E, you would actually have to figure out the E major scale and then use the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 like this on that to get these same scale degrees. Otherwise, you're not going to have all the information you need. And not all the information is even available here, which is why I said we're getting into a little bit more complexity. For instance, there is no G sharp in the key of C. So if you use a C augmented in the key of C, you're actually changing the key. And so it can get a little bit complicated, which is why there are collegiate courses on this kind of thing. And I'm no expert at this. Like I said, I'm learning along with you. I am by no means an expert at kind of this kind of stuff. I tend to very much be do it first, see what it sounds like, and if it sounds good, then it's good, and then later I can figure out, oh, okay, that's what this actually is. So, like, I believe that this is actually what you would call a Phrygian minor, or a Phrygian formula, which is a 1 flat 2 5, not a suspended a sus. Okay, so that. There you go. So this is a Phrygian triad. Sounds a little odd, doesn't it? So, but a Phrygian triad. Let's see. Can I spell this? Maybe. I have no idea if that's actually spelled correctly. I apologize if it's not. But that Phrygian would be a 1 flat 2. Flat 2 5, and then we can expand that out just a bit. Okay, so you kind of get the idea here. There's also, I guess this will be the last one we'll go over today, but there's also Lydian, and the only reason I want to cover this is because I actually really have I have a great preference for this, but a Lydian is going to be a 1 sharp 4. Sharp 4 5, and that's going to sound like let's go back to our C here. All right, so we have a 1, a 4 is an F, and we're going to sharp it to an F sharp, and then we have our 5. So this is a Lydian. All right, it's sort of similar to the Phrygian. All right. Very, very dissonant chord, but you can use it in some fun ways. Like, for instance, you may not play out the chord. You may do what's called an arpeggio, where you sort of just have each note play like that. Or here's our Phrygian again. All right, so you can see how these are creating some tension and creating some, I don't know, just some vibes. then back to our major there. Okay, so these are our basic triads, all right? Now we can get into what I talked about last week was some chord extensions. Now that we've touched on just a few of the different triads that are available. And I did say we'd do some examples here of different keys. So we'll delete that and we'll do A, B, then we have a C sharp. We have a D, E, F sharp, G sharp, and then back to A. And these are the chords. Oops. So that's a minor. This is a minor. This is a minor. And this is a diminished. And then the notes that would be in that scale would be A, B, C, D, E, F sharp, G sharp, A, and then it would kind of continue along, right? And actually, we are going to continue along the, see, because I want to get into extensions here, and we're going to use A now to do it. E, F sharp, G sharp, and then back to A. Okay, so this is our A major scale, all right? And it has 3 sharps in it. And if you look at a circle of fifths, you'll see that A sharp has, or A has 3 sharps in it. That's the C sharp, F sharp, and G sharp. But the chords all remain the same. So we still have an A, we have a B minor, a C sharp. These are both minor, both major, minor, diminished, etc. So no matter what key you're in, this is always going to be the same if you're in this major scale. All right. We're going to touch on minor scales in the future, but it gets even more complicated. There are 3 different minor scales and 3 different formulas, and it gets complicated. Like I said, there's a reason why there are collegiate courses on music theory, and believe me, I am no expert when it comes to this kind of thing. I've just sort of been learning as I go. But we're going to get into chord extensions now. And so those usually come in the way of what are called sevenths. All right. So we have triads here, and then we have sevenths over here. And just like with triads, you also have different types of seventh chords, right? So you have a major 7 chord. All right. And a major 7 is going to be a one. Geez, I can't type. 1, 3, 5, and 7, not 9. Really cannot type at all today. Apologize. So a major 7 chord formula is a 1, 3, 5, 7. And if we want to figure out what that is in our A major scale, it is a 1, a 3, a 5, and a 7. And so if we want to take that back to our example here, we have an A, we have a C sharp, an E, and a G sharp. And that is a major 7. All right. An A major 7. 1, 3, 5, 7. This tends to work with the minor 7 as well. in this case, it's going to be a 1, flat 3, a flat 3, a 5, and a 7. So if we wanted to make this a minor 7th chord, we would flat that. And then actually would flat that as well. It actually works. There is no G sharp in an A minor scale. A minor and C are relative scales, so an A minor scale actually has all the same notes as a C major scale. There are no sharps or flats in an A minor. If we're in an A major scale, we have a 1, a minor third. So instead of an A sharp, it's a C. We have an E, and then we have a G in the key of A minor. So that's why we needed to bring down this G sharp to a G in order to make this an A minor 7th. But I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that it would work in this case, in the case of a B minor 7. So if we were to do a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, we can figure out what a B minor 7 is, and that would be a B, a D, a F sharp, and an A. All right, 1, 3, 5, 7. Now that's not the same as this scale or this formula here, because we're not flatting this third, but we can figure out what is in a B minor, what notes are in this B minor through this method. Okay. So if we were to take this to a B, now we have a B minor 7, and it's a B, a D, an F sharp, and an A. And if we go back here, we have a B, a D, an F sharp, and an A. And so we have a minor 7 with this B minor, and that sounds like this. All right. And the 7th chords are just a good way to add more depth or character to your chords. It's going to make them sound a little bit more complex, a little bit more sophisticated. They are adding a little bit of dissonance to the chords, but the purpose is not necessarily to resolve that tension in this case. It's just to add complexity and texture to your chords, as opposed to some of these different triads, which are used to create that tension and potentially resolve that tension. When it comes to major and minor 7ths, the idea really is just to add a little bit of character, a little more vibe, a little more texture, a little more thickness to your chords, okay? And so it makes them a little bit more rich. So if we take away the 7th, which is this A from our B minor, we have this, which sounds fine. There's nothing wrong with that. That sounds great. But if we add in that A again, it just adds a little richness to the chord, okay? Now, when it comes to 7ths, what you'll find is that in your major scales anyways, you're going to find that your 1, I guess we can do it here. So major 7, always. Minor 7, always. Minor 7, always. Major 7, always. Dominant 7, always on your 5. Minor 7. Diminished 7. And then back to our major 7. Okay, so in any major scale, this is always going to be the case. You're always going to have 2 major 7ths, your 1 and your 4 chord. They're always going to be major. All right. So if you're trying to apply sevenths to a chord progression you're working on, the 1 and the 4 are always going to be a major 7, which means they're always going to have this 1, 3, 5, 7. Your minor 7s, there's going to be 3 of them in every major scale, which is going to be your 2, your 3, and your 6. You're always going to have a dominant 7 on your 5th, and we'll get into what that is in a second. And then technically, your 7 is actually, this should actually be a half diminished. So and let's just expand that a little bit so you can hit. The 7th is going to be a half diminished when it comes to the 7th chord, not a full diminished 7th. All right. So this is kind of the way it is always going to be when you're working in any major scale. All right. And then a dominant 7 is going to be a 1, 3, 5, and then a flat 7. And the B, by the way, is stands for flat. This number, pound, whatever when you want to call it, this stands for sharp when you're annotating music. I'm sorry if I didn't make that clear earlier, but the symbol for flat is like this little B, and then the symbol for sharp is this little number sign here. All right. So a dominant 7 is a 1, 3, 5 flat 7th. And if we come back here, in the key of A, our 5 is an E. So a dominant 7 would be an E major dominant 7. So we would bring that there, and we would have an E, a G sharp, because it's a major chord, a B, and then a flat 7 would be this D here. That kind of has more of a bluesy sound. That's kind of the way I distinguish between dominant and major 7ths, or minor 7ths. A dominant 7 tends to have a more bluesy sound, whereas a major 7 tends to have more of a jazzy sound. Now, that's just how I think about it. That's probably not a great way to think about it now that I'm thinking about it. But that's kind of what it sounds like to me. But the difference between the dominant 7 and the major 7. The major 7 would be up a half step on just the regular 7 here. There's your E major 7. Your dominant 7 is a flat 7. And it gives it, in my opinion, kind of a bluesy sort of sound. And then we'll get into, real quick, we'll do a half diminished 7. And expand that just a hair so we can see it all. And the scale for a half diminished. Oh, let's see. I guess would be just we have a G sharp. We do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We know the notes in our G sharp half diminished would be a G sharp, a B. So we'll bring this up to, oops, not quite. Actually, we're going to bring this down here. There we go. G sharp, a B. Again, I'm not an expert when it comes to this stuff. Like I said, I'm kind of learning along with you. A G sharp, a B, a D, and an F sharp. So that's right there. Okay. And that would be a 1, 2, flat 3. So a 1, flat 3. If I'm doing this right, I might have this one wrong. Sorry. A 1, a flat 3, E sharp, D sharp, a flat 5, and a 7, I think. I could be wrong about that. It looks like it is a 1, a flat 3, a flat 5, and a 7. For a half diminished. So, yeah. That seems to be the formula there. Expand that up a little bit so that we can actually see everything. And let's actually put the F there. Why does that look so weird? Half diminished. There we go. Expand that out. All right. A 1, a flat 3, a flat 5, and a 7. And that would be a half diminished. And as you can see, we can figure out the chords that go into that by using this. By the same extension, we can also figure out what an 11 or a 9 or any of these other additions you want to add to your chord. A 6, for instance, you could put in there if you really so desired. And that's just going to create more tension for you. So, like if we were to say, want to come back to our normal example of an A major 7 with a 9, we can add a 9 into there. So let's do this. A, C sharp, E. That is an A major triad here. But if we wanted to, say, add in another scale degree, and you can experiment with this. This is a chance, again, there are no real hard, fast rules. There are some formulas here, obviously, and they're called different things, but you can figure out a lot of this just by kind of playing with it yourself and experimenting. You don't necessarily need to know what a Phrygian chord is in order to play a Phrygian chord, for example. You can just kind of have some fun with it. So you can start adding some of these numbers together. You know, for instance, you can have a 1, a 3, a 5, and a 9 instead of a 7. And a 9 instead of a 7 would be a, what is that, an A? That would be a B. So let's add in a B there. So now this is an A major chord with the 9 in it, which is a B. Okay. You can also put that B down here, but then that becomes a B second chord, if you will. If we come back here and we look, so we have a 1, a 2. The 2 is a B. The 9 is a B. So you can have a 1, 2, 3, 5, or you can have a 1, 3, 5, 9. And it's just a matter of where you're putting the B. It's just whether you want it down here or you want it up here. Okay? And actually, that's just kind of the same with the 7 chord. So in A major, the 7 chord would be the G sharp. Well, if you put the G sharp below this A right here, it's the same note, but but it's given a different little vibe, right? Depending on where you put it. And so you can kind of have fun with that as well. Do you want it above the chord? Do you want it below the chord? You could put it way down here in the bass if you want to. Again, it's just a G sharp. It's the same note. And that's an A major 7. It's just that the G sharp is way down here instead of up here or over here. All right. So you can have fun with this kind of stuff. You can experiment. You can play around. You can put, say, for instance, you can put the 6th in there, which would be an F sharp. So if we put an A major 6, so this is an A major, an A, an E sharp, and an E, but we're adding an F sharp, which is the 6th degree of that scale. All right. So it's not just 7ths. You're not limited to just 7ths or these triads. You can put 9s. You can put 11s. You know, what happens if we put, say, a D in this A major, or an A and a D and a B, which would be a 9th. So this is a 9 and 11. You're adding a little bit of tension. You're adding a little bit of complexity to the chord. You're adding some extraness to the chord. So this is where you can get fun and creative. You don't have to just... there's nothing wrong with sticking to these basic triads here, this 1, 3, 5, or the majors, the minors. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. You're diminished. You can create a lot of fun, cool songs. A lot of pop songs kind of stick to that sort of thing, just the major and minor without much, coloration of the chord, and nothing wrong with that. You can make great songs without coloring these chords. But you can color the chords. It's sort of like a painter. I mean, you can use more than just red, blue, and yellow. You can use, some green, some orange, some pink, some, I don't know. I'm not great with colors. You can eggshell white instead of just white. I don't know. I'm not sure I could tell the difference between eggshell white and white, but you can use different colors to create different textures when it comes to these chords. And that's what these extensions are. They're just ways to add flavor to your chords, to add a little something extra to them, in order to add interest or complexity, to give you more feels. So that's an A major with a 9 and an 11 in it. What happens if we were to, say, go from the A major to we'll say the 1 to the 4. All right, so the 4 in key of A major is D major. So we'll put a D major in there. And so here's just from an A major to a D major. And then back to an A major. All right. Now let's add, just for fun, let's add back in some of these colorations. And so for a D major, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Why don't we add in, say, a B there and an E there. And then we can end it with just an A major 7. All right. And so you can kind of start to have some fun with this. You can just, play around with it and stack some notes on top of each other and see what happens. You can have, and it can create these kind of fun little things. Instead of just having an A to a D to an A, you can add these colorations and give the song a little bit more vibe. All right, and you can hear that this A and this A, they don't sound exactly the same, even though they're the same basic building blocks. But when you add these extensions onto the chords, you're adding that fun complexity that can allow you to create some different moods, some different vibes. And you can do that by, adding in some tension and resolving it, or, just creating that colorization. So anyways, like I said, this is not going to be super comprehensive, and I know it's been complicated, and I really hope that this has all made sense to you. Like I said, once again, and I apologize, I am not an expert when it comes to this kind of stuff. I'm more of a do the thing and see what it sounds like, and if I like it, great, and if not, I'll just move something. Maybe I want it there. That sounded janky to me, but, for some of you, you might have loved that. You might have thought, ooh, that's the note, that's the thing. Like, what happens if we do that? Yeah, don't be afraid to experiment. Again, the big takeaway on all of this is not that you're necessarily following all of these formulas or that you're doing things by the book. It's that you can kind of understand sort of how to put these things together in a way that can make sense, and then you can experiment and see where the music takes you. You can use some of these extensions even as sort of pseudo melodies if you wanted to. So if you follow this, that's kind of a melody right there, right? And so this extension, these top notes here, are sort of la, 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 adding a bit of a melody to the chords. And so this is just a way to add movement and give some context and some variety to your chords. Yeah. So anyways, I hope all this has been helpful. I hope that you've been inspired to go out and experiment and play around with some of these concepts and figure out exactly, even if you don't know what you're doing, that's fine. This is how you learn, is by just kind of playing around and seeing what happens. I just arbitrarily picked the 1 and the 4, but you can try doing a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 if you want to, or you can try doing a 1, a 6, a 3, and a 2. You can use just the major ones. You can use a 1, a 4, and a 5. You can use just the minor ones. You can do a 2, a 3, and a 6. Add in this diminished chord if you really want to, or make it a half diminished with the 7th in there if you want. There are all sorts of fun things that you can do, chord progressions that you can make. You can pick the numbers out of a hat, for instance. Just write out the numbers 1 through 7 on 7 different pieces of paper, put them into a hat, and then pick out 4 of them, and that's the order of your chord progression, whatever it happens to be, and see if you can make that work. You can think it out more. You can be more thoughtful about it than that. If you don't like the randomness, you can, try and do a pattern that's like a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or something along those lines. You can do a 1, a 3, a 5. Mix it up. Have fun with it. You can do, a repeating chord that's, say, a 1 to the 4 to the 1. You can do a 1, 4, 5, 6. You can do a 2, 3, 1, 4, and then repeat that over and over and over again. You can change it up. You can have it be that no chord ever repeats twice in a row for the entire length of the song. Just a random string of these chords that just never repeat, never have fun, experiment. Like, I'm not there. When it comes to music, again, and I know I say this a lot, but it's so true. There's no right or wrong. There's just what sounds good to you and what doesn't. If you don't like this augmented chord, if you don't like how that 1 sharp 1 3 sharp 5 sounds, don't use it. If you do like it, if you like the tension that it creates and the weirdness that an augmented sounds. I want or you can play around with it, maybe have it. If you like that, that's awesome. Use it. If you don't like it, great. Don't use it. No one is saying that you have to use any of this stuff. It's just more tools in your tool belt to add some variety, some flavor to your music, to be able to, tools to create tension and maybe relieve that tension by resolving it to, your 1-3-5s, your 1-3-5-7s, or whatever, however you want to do it. We may try and dig a little bit more into these concepts in the future, but like this really is a great place to start. You can spend a lifetime learning about music theory and how to apply it, and all the ins and outs of it, and that's great. I highly encourage you to get more into it, but these are just tools in your arsenal, right? There's nothing that says you have to use any of this stuff. You can just stick to your major and minor triad, keep it super simple, and create some amazing music doing that. You can add in these major sevens, minor sevens, your dominants. That should be a 7. I apologize. Your dominant sevens, your half diminished, like all of this stuff. You are welcome to apply this in any way that you think sounds good to you. And I hope that this has all been helpful in maybe, if nothing else, getting your creative juices flowing. So I think for next week, what we're going to get into is, now that we've covered some of these concepts, we're going to get more into the idea of how you would actually go about writing a song. And I'm going to take you through sort of what my process tends to be when it comes to creating ideas or generating ideas for music. And I hope that will be helpful. So it's going to be a little bit more on the practical end of things. This was more of a kind of a theory, more on the theory or the sciencey side, if you will, and we're going to dig more into the art side of it later. The more practical concepts of this, how you might apply some of these when you're trying to make music, and get into how you would go about doing that. And I think we might also touch in, because something I realized we haven't touched on is loops, and that's super popular in modern music production, and so it's something that we should at least touch on. Not everybody is into loops, but they can be exceptionally helpful, especially if you're just beginning in music. So we're going to get into that kind of concept in the future as well. But I think for now, we're going to leave it here. And I know this has been a little bit more advanced, and I apologize if I've done a poor job explaining this to you. This is where music, and we're just scratching the surface. As complex as this might sound, we are just scratching the surface. So hopefully these have given you a few tools to put in your tool belt when you go out there and start writing your own music, start producing your own tracks. But this can get way more involved, and so we're just kind of scratching the surface, and I hope I've done a good job of presenting this in a way that makes sense, in a way that you can apply it in your own writing. And like I said, we're going to get more into depth about how to go about using these tools in future videos, and how you can create your own musical tracks, and kind of my process on how to go about doing it. And it works for me. It may not work for you, but it's a place to start. Anyways, I've been rambling long enough. I hope this has been helpful. I hope you have a wonderful day, and that you go out there and create your own masterpieces, your own works of art, and just have fun. Be creative. Enjoy yourselves. Music is about fun and feelings, and expressing those feelings to others. And so ideally, I've given you some tools on to equip to help you do that. I hope you have yourselves a wonderful week, and I will talk to you later. Bye-bye.